there's a lot more sort of to it than just the space where one might think, oh, this is a digital whiteboard, cool. But really to get to the best collaborative outcomes, it's really about multiple elements. So this is kind of, it seems like it's just some fun, playful confetti, but it is a part of kind of a bigger philosophy we have around this idea of like designing collaboration.
Welcome to another episode of Behind the Experience, where we give you an inside look behind the top product-led experiences. Each week you'll hear inspiring new examples, some really hard-earned lessons and proven strategies. This is your host, Ramli John, and today I have here Lauren. She is the VP of Product Growth at MURAL. It is a digital workspace for guided visual collaboration. Really excited to be digging into MURAL because I've used it many times in the past during workshops and other things like that. Lauren, how are you today?
Awesome. I'm so glad to hear you are a MURAL user, and I'll pick your brain too. But yeah, I'm doing great. Very busy week of planning for next year and lots to think about and talk about there, but happy to be here today.
Thank you for joining us. I know our friend Andrew Kaplan introduced us, so I really appreciate you joining us during this busy season, especially with Thanksgiving coming up and Christmas coming up as well. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
I want to jump in and talk about MURAL itself. A big part about onboarding is really knowing what success look like for the new users. I'm curious what that is for MURAL, and I'm guessing it depends on what they're trying to do. So, like, I'm curious what your take is on that. What does success look like for new users at MURAL?
Yeah, so MURAL can be used for many, many things, but ultimately, MURAL is about having, meaningful collaborative sessions, and that can be ultimately to reach some kind of outcome. That could be improving teamwork, productivity. Sometimes people think about it like better meetings, more innovation, or even faster and better decisions because you're able to collaborate. So essentially, we think about it in terms of getting folks as quickly and easily as possible to that powerful collaboration moment. You can break that down into a couple different ways. So typically it starts with a user signing up for MURAL, going through that process. They create a workspace during that onboarding process. Then they have to create content, right? So you create a MURAL with specific content. It has to be something such that you're ready to share it with somebody else. And then you go ahead and you actually do that act of sharing it with somebody else. You're inviting them to your workspace or specifically to that MURAL. And then they have a collaborative session. So they're oftentimes, creating content together, reacting to it. That can be measured through things like, widget creation, like sticky notes on your canvas. And then you have kind of that includes the original host or the facilitator of that session, the person who's actually signed up and created content. But then you have a whole separate group, which are the participants. So, for the participants, it's can they easily join your MURAL in your workspace and participate in that collaboration? Ideally, they're seeing the value and seeing how easy it is. So really, ultimately, it's about that collaboration, but that involves multiple people and them coming together to have that moment of collaboration where they say, oh, aha, this actually made my outcome much easier.
It makes sense. What I'm hearing is like what success look like depends if you're the creator and the joiner. I'm not sure if that's the right term, but is that fair? Like the joiner is more like, can I get in easily? Can I like collaborate? And the creator is more like, can I create this experience for my students or joiners or other folks like that?
Yeah. So we have to think about it certainly from whomever is, whether it's the host, the facilitator, the creator, however you want to call it. It can be called lots of different things depending upon how you see yourself, really. And then, you have the participant or the joiner, the person who's coming in to work with you. And really, just in layman's terms, you have the person who wants to work with somebody else, bring them in, and work together. And it's interesting because as we started working on onboarding and activation overall, we've really had to balance that mindset of an individual person and what they're trying to accomplish, and then like the workspace. So if you think about it, ultimately, a workspace level is the one that's going to convert, for example. Like you pay at a workspace level, but then you have individuals who are leveraging the product and getting the value, which ultimately leads to that moment of, oh, is this worth something that, we want to pay for or not? So as we've gone through our process of thinking about activation and onboarding, we really had to kind of like weigh our understanding of each individual user, what they need, and then ultimately how that feeds up to, a workspace or an account level.
That makes a ton of sense, and I think that is a better term, participant and host, or somebody who created it. So I love how there is a really difference there. In terms of metrics that you and your team track, what are some metrics that that you take a look at to make sure that things are working well in terms of that activation and onboarding?
Yeah, so we actually, one of the first things I did when I joined Mural, which is going on 2 years ago now, was to officially sit down and say, let's create our activation metrics. So thinking about setup, aha, and habit, and what exactly are those? How do we look at that from both a qualitative and a quantitative perspective? And here I love the Reforge framework of sort of working backwards from retention and really thinking about what are the things that are necessary from someone who's really ongoing getting value from your product to like what do they have to do in the very beginning, and really defining those specific moments. I like the methodology of breaking it out into individual metrics within a larger metric because I think it also helps you sort of spot the areas in which you're losing people, and that can help you frame focus for your work. And so when we started on that journey 2 years ago, we were at the user centric level and we were thinking about we did call it the workspace creator, for lack of better terms, as the member type, but essentially the host or the facilitator. And we were talking about, okay, what does it take for them to get set up? Okay, they have to sign up, create a workspace, create this mural with content, but then what's next? And so that became the aha. Where's the aha? And it was about collaboration. So collaborating in that first week. And then habit, it's like collaborating continuously. But then there were separate definitions for the participant or the joiner because for them, it wasn't about creating content. It was actually about coming in and joining that collaboration. And that served us well for, I'd say, the first year or so within our work. It helped guide our thinking about those different experiences and how they come together. But what it kind of missed was that it's about individuals coming together on behalf of like a team, right? And so collaboration happens at a team level. It doesn't happen at an individual level. And so we actually just finished and launched the company last week a new set of definitions for activation in particular at the workspace level. And that redefines our thinking. Setup remains relatively the same because you still need a mural with content that you can share and inviting somebody in. But the activation becomes less about an individual and more about those multiple members. So it's actually defined as 2+ members. And we've defined it as 40 pieces of content in 7 days. So that's kind of like we simplified a bunch of variables and said, how do you know what good collaboration looks like? And through the data and through our qualitative understanding of collaboration, we were able to kind of streamline into that definition of, okay, that's when someone's experienced the core value prop for
Mm,
the first time. They had that aha moment. We also look at things like 1-day retention and other things that kind of help us as a leading indicator perspective. But in general, we're really measuring the steps of the
mm.
activation journey.
I really, what was that thing again? 40
Yeah,
interactions in 7 days.
Yeah, 40 objects or widgets or whatever you want to
Cool.
call it. Basically, pieces of content. So that could be a shape, it could be
Mm.
a sticky note, is the most common in terms of how people are typically interacting. But yeah, it's like pieces of content within a mural.
That makes a ton of sense. In terms of like this whole journey, I love how you share this journey of improving that experience. Did you work with any other teams, and like how's working with other teams look like which I guess the other question is like which other teams did you ended up working with to make sure that this experience is seamless for new users?
Yeah. So I always say that product-led growth in particular is a team sport. It is
Mhm.
not something that like one team by themselves can own. And In fact, if you have it set up that way, you're probably missing the point across the rest of your organization. And that obviously applies to onboarding, which is a really important part of any PLG motion. And so while my team specifically does own the onboarding experience, we own it specifically for free and self-serve users. But we have a customer success growth team that works on onboarding new members specifically into our enterprise accounts. So think more from like a high touch perspective. And we split it up in that way because there are some experiences and learnings that apply to both, but there are also different needs and capabilities for each. And so there's a lot of knowledge sharing, learnings, hypothesis creation together. And even from more of an enterprise perspective, we tend to use tools that are like out of the box for their experiments, but there are things that require development work that maybe we support as well. And I can give specific examples. We have some other teams. We have a personalization team that owns our dashboard experience, and that's a really important part of a new user experience. So we work with them to make sure that, you know, we have a differentiated and a right experience for a new member versus somebody who's been around with us for a while. So especially around learning content, that's a really important distinction. From our assisted sales customers, we have humans who run onboarding sessions, and we work really hard at gathering the learnings from humans or talking to humans and figuring out what we can apply from a product perspective. And then lastly, one thing I've learned working on onboarding activation at my last two companies, this applies to MailChimp and Mural, is the core of the product is often the most important part of getting activation right. And so we work with our Canvas team a lot on UX improvements that support fast and easy onboarding. And as I talked a lot about, content creation is at the heart of a lot of this. If that's hard or if we're missing capabilities, then you'll get stuck there from an onboarding and activation perspective. So it's really important that we communicate what we're seeing from a new member perspective and that we're making improvements to that experience that support somebody getting started really easily. This could include things like our templates and the content within the templates, all the way to like, what's the usability of our navigation within the Canvas experience. So that is one not to be underestimated, and at MailChimp was actually ultimately where we really ended up leaning into in terms of improving our onboarding and activation as well.
I love that hearing this, that it is a cross-functional effort, like really making sure that this experience is seamless. So that for people tuning in, it's not like it's a product thing, you know, it's like it's a customer success thing. It really needs to be a cross-functional. You mentioned product-led growth needs to be a team sport. I really love that you're reiterating this for our listeners. I want to jump in now and share one of the experiences here at Mural with folks who are tuning in via audio here. What people see here right now is a screen, and then there's it's a canvas, and people are as soon as somebody clicks it, they choose an infinite blank canvas instead of choosing a template. It's the experience I chose here. One of my hunches was that more people would be clicking to templates, and what I heard from you, Lauren, is that this is actually not the case. Like more people are actually starting off with a blank canvas. Is that correct?
Yeah, so we do have folks that are starting from a template, but I think especially in the very beginning, a lot of folks just want to come in and sort of play around and get to know what Mural is and how usable it is and does it meet their needs. So one of my hypotheses here is that unless you have a very distinct understanding of what you're trying to accomplish initially, you might be overwhelmed with template selection. And so you think, you know what, I'm just going to go ahead, dig in, get started with a blank canvas and take a look and maybe use templates later in your journey. But we definitely have a huge chunk of folks who do start from a template. And that experience is similar, but this one is the most well-developed right now.
So that's really interesting. That makes sense. If they're overwhelmed with choice, they'll choose the first one on the left, which is infinite blank canvas. But there is like this really cool checklist here that goes through it. Getting started. Number one is building a space to collaborate, create a mural. Second, make it your own, give it a title. Third is write down some thoughts with 5 sticky notes. Then make it visual, move around, and invite your friends. I'm guessing this is like something that you and your team experimented with to figure out like what is. You mentioned around Reforge, like working backwards as to what the retention is. This exactly what this work involved? Like here are the 6 steps to be successful with Mural, essentially.
Yeah, so we call this onboarding quests, and a lot of what we
Onboarding
were trying
quests.
to
Love it.
do was add some fun and gamification into the process. And I think the hard part is always about getting people to learn in a way that doesn't feel super clunky and is at least somewhat interesting, such that they'll complete it, because when they do complete it, they feel more prepared to go on and be successful. And so I really like this experience because the team did have more fun with it. We worked at adding, as you can see, celebrations and a bit more gamification.
Emoji.
And psychologically, the checklist works. I mean, I think like LinkedIn nailed that from the very beginning, and it's a strategy a lot of folks employ. So from here, we really looked at what are the things that you need to get started, and how do you take something that has endless possibility and boil it down and make it pretty simple and start to have someone build their confidence in what they can do inside a mural. So those 6 things are really, if you look at it, it's a part of getting to that setup moment. So I'm creating the mural, I have a title associated with it, I've added sticky notes for content. And guess what? I've invited someone else to my mural who can start to
Mm.
collaborate with me. So it's really a way of kind of showing you, but making it fun.
One thing I really find interesting is that when somebody clicks on one of the items, it is not like a product tour. It's actually like a little GIF or GIF, however anybody wants to pronounce this. So that it is interactive, but it is not like hand holding the user. I'm guessing this is like based on experience that Mural users want to click around and guiding them to do something like, for example, this one idea two, is actually a much better experience for Mural users than it is just hand holding them through the experience.
Yeah, I think the hard part about onboarding is a lot of folks don't want to give you that attention to go through, just a click through a bunch of steps and show me how to do it. I actually want to do it myself, and I'm learning better by doing it
Mm,
myself. And this is through a bunch of different experiments that came before this that helped us learn that we needed to take an approach that's a bit more hands-on, that build the confidence. Because I think especially we learned this through qualitative research, that there could be a trepidation around getting started with content, and especially for those that are participants. Like, there's a fear that they're going to come in and do something wrong. I'm going to delete your content or move it in a way that totally messes up our entire session. And so the thinking was, how do we create a way that you can learn but also do at the same time? And that's something I'm really interested in exploring more next year, is thinking about the different ways that people learn, because not everybody learns in the same way. And in fact, just a quick little story. I had a medical procedure last year, and I remember a doctor asking me, like, how do you like to learn? And I
interesting.
had to stop and think, and I was like, what? How do I like to learn? And ultimately, what they wanted to explain something to me about the upcoming procedure. And it was like, do you want me to tell you about it? Do you want me to
Mm,
show you? Or do you want
mm.
to be hands on with it? And that really stuck with me, because I think that applies to many things like onboarding. Not everybody wants to learn or is capable of learning in the same way. And so I'm thinking a lot about allowing different options for people to learn in the way that they like to learn.
That makes a ton of sense. Like some people are visual learners, some people are clicking learners where they want to click
Mm-hmm.
around. Some people are video learners, and giving people that option is super interesting. A really good point with that. In terms of that emoji, when somebody completes something, there's like this celebratory emoji that comes up from the bottom of the screen. Uh, it gives me a sense of delight. It's like, oh, that feels
Yeah.
good. Is that something that you've seen, like users who see this is like, oh, I just want to keep going. I want to see more of that emoji come from the bottom.
Yeah, when we did initial user testing, people loved it. I think that,
Mm,
one, it's like real-time feedback that I did it
right.
right. And so it's
Yes.
without encouraging, it's encouraging you that, yeah, you did it right, and you have that affirmation about it. It also looks fun and cool. I think it helps
Right.
you sort of see the power of, oh wow, I could actually do this during my collaborative sessions. It adds some humanity to it also,
It
right?
does.
Like, and so I think that's a lot of what we're trying to accomplish, is kind of demystify, make it a little less intimidating, and also just celebrate the little wins along the way.
Mm. True, that makes sense. It also adds you said it humanizes this experience, but it also adds a lot of playfulness. I feel like, oh, this
Yeah.
feels like play. And that's what like it creates for me, where like when I'm thinking about brainstorming, there's I forgot what is the book called, like game storming, where like that's a book where around like brainstorming is around playing games, and this feels very playful. Is that what you've heard from other users, or like they've used words like delight, playful, humanizes the experience
Most
with
people probably don't say humanize, but they react like, "Oh, wow, cool." So definitely you see the delight, you see the
right.
playfulness. Interestingly, one of our company values is play to wow. And so we definitely
Interesting.
think about play in our product. And
Right.
it's also a part of creating the culture around collaboration. So I think
Mm,
what's really interesting, and you're starting to see more from Mural, is it's not just about the tool or the place or the space where you're collaborating. It's also about how. So what type of
mm,
mind frame are you in? Or do you have trust and psychological safety? What methods are you using? So there's a lot more sort of to it than just the space, where one might think, oh, this is a digital whiteboard, cool. But really, to get to the best collaborative outcomes, it's really about multiple elements. So this is kind of, it seems like it's just some fun, playful confetti, but it is a part of kind of a bigger philosophy we have around this
I like it.
idea of like designing collaboration.
I really love that. Around, I didn't even know. I didn't know that played a wow. That's a great. That's a great value, for sure. In terms of a company, for sure. For sure. In terms of like the choosing a template now here, when I choose a template, it is definitely a different experience where there is still a little bit of checkbox on the some checklist on the right, but now it's walking into this. In this case, I chose a workshop, a toolkit template, and each it has the outline to the different things like the title of the workshop, the agenda, the title, the ground rules, and other stuff like that. From what I've heard, this is something that is evolving, and as an experience for new users essentially.
Yeah, so the interesting part about templates is that anybody can use a template, obviously a new user, an existing user. And so there's already a built-in onboarding for an existing user around a
Mm,
template, because
right.
what we're doing here is we're not just teaching you about the template, we're actually walking you through, you can see some of the how in terms of like
Right.
methodologies. So to not to get super meta, but it's like onboarding within onboarding. And so a lot
Mm,
of what we've been trying to sort through is how do you actually onboard to a template while onboarding into a mural? And there's a lot to think through in terms of teaching the tool itself, but also teaching the template and the methodology. And so we've been running some experiments around what's the right sequencing. In fact, if you do onboard from a template, we're working on how you would basically integrate what's great about quests, but also not
mm.
lose some of the onboarding to the specific template content. So there's definitely a balancing act here, and that's something that we're working through the best way to handle that specifically for new users versus existing members.
That's pretty awesome. Thank you for sharing that. In terms of like those experiments that you and your team have run, are there ones that you can share that surprised you a bit in terms of the results, where like you were expecting a result and then you got something else with that experiment?
Yeah. Well, ultimately, I'll say working on onboarding and activation, as you know, is really hard. Moving the needle on a high level metric like activation is not something that you're typically going to do through just one experiment. From my
Mm,
experience, it's like the culmination of a whole bunch of
mm,
improvements over time. And so I think time and time again, you're sort of surprised, like quests, for example, you would think just by itself, that's a great new experience. That'll improve activation. It didn't. It didn't
mm,
improve the high level metric. Now, it did improve the amount of folks that were completing onboarding and learning. We saw that more people were creating content and getting to the setup moment. But ultimately, there's still a big transition between I'm comfortable with the basics and I'm creating content to I'm ready to collaborate with somebody else and get value. And so while that was a positive, improvement to our overarching experience, it didn't solve the, hey, I'm getting significantly more people to be successful ultimately in collaboration. And I think that's where the like what and the how is so important. So in onboarding, we're trying to teach you both how to use this tool, this piece of software, but we're also educating you on use cases or actually how to collaborate. And so balancing those two things out from a learning perspective can be really difficult. It's one of the things that we're working on for next year, is thinking more about how do you actually teach somebody the how, but disguise it through the, you know what I mean? Like through the what.
Right.
So it's almost like you're learning without knowing that you're learning.
Mm.
And so I think that's going to be a really important part of some of our lessons going forward, is how you incorporate those two things in particular. Another example, to get very tactical, is we learned that navigation is one of the most difficult things to learn in a mural. And there's specifically in the mural on the bottom corner is a navigation panel. And in that panel, people get very confused about what does what. And so we ran some specific experiments targeted towards teaching folks how to navigate a bit better. And we thought, oh, well, if you can learn the navigation elements, that's a huge blocker, again, to getting to your point of aha. And it was an experience improvement. People used it, but again, it ultimately didn't get us to that goal of, getting more folks to set up and aha moment. So I think those, I still see them as successes in the sense that they improved
learning
and are getting us one step closer to providing that great experience. But it's definitely a combination of work over time. Saw that at MailChimp as well, where individual level experiments might have been flat or very slightly positive. But when you started to stack those experience improvements over time, that's when you actually saw the results in terms of your overarching activation metrics.
Thank you for sharing that. Really love this lesson, that it is a combination of different things that add up to a huge improvement. In terms of what you mentioned a little bit already in several responses that you've had, what are you excited about for 2023 in terms of what your team is going to be, experimenting or trying out, that you can share to the folks who are tuning in to this?
Yeah. So as I mentioned in the beginning, there's a difference in the mentality and the experience of somebody who's getting started as the workspace creator, who's very likely maybe a host or facilitator of a session. And there's the participant, and there's a lot more participants than there are initially creators. And that's a really important group for the success of a collaboration. And ultimately, if you do a very good job, some of those folks might go on to become hosts or facilitators themselves. But one of the things that we have learned is that facilitators or hosts might have in mind a way that they want to onboard participants for their particular session. And actually really cool, I saw this through some of our customer research, is that customers have built their own murals to do onboarding for participants. So like they created a mural that's like, here's how you add a sticky and here's how you do all of these things. And our CS team, same thing. They have a very high touch version of that, where they're maybe like teaching folks in a new enterprise how to do something. And so we're really thinking about this idea of maybe host or facilitator triggered or led onboarding. What if they had the opportunity to actually in some way design or even just like trigger that onboarding such that a participant is prepared? Because there's nothing more frustrating for a host or facilitator who's like done all this work, create great content, they're ready to have a productive session, and then people are like, I can't get into your session, or I'm scared, I don't know what I'm doing, or they're wasting a bunch of time in the session, like teaching somebody how to do something within the experience. So there's really something there that I think is really, really interesting that we could explore, giving more power to that initial creator, facilitator, or host, and creating a really great experience for the participant in general.
Love all of this. Thank you for sharing that. That wraps up our recording for this session. Thank you for sharing everything you have around like improving the experience at Mural. One final question: where can people find out more about you, and like where can people find out more about Mural online?
Yeah. So feel free to follow me on LinkedIn. I won't say I have a very consistent content game there, but I tend to post about the work that I'm doing and share a bit more about what we're doing at Mural. You can always check us out at mural.co as well as on the Mural blog. And yeah, thank you so much for having me today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Lauren. Appreciate it.